And we have to go into a little bit of corruption here. Now, we have been revealing, it seems like almost every week, more names that are being released in reference to relationships in some way, shape, or form with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, we know that Bill Gates before was one of those names that was released. He tried to push back on that, tried to say that it wasn't what people thought it was. But there is now new information that will confirm that the relationship that Bill Gates had with Jeffrey Epstein was not just a couple of dinners, so to speak. But let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to when this information was first revealed that Bill Gates did have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And Bill Gates' defense of that. I told you back then I did not believe him. I thought that he was hiding something. But let's revisit just for shits and giggles. Let's go down that lane.
Of the richest and most powerful men in the world, Bill Gates, who's in town to speak to our politicians and watch the tennis, among other things. And last night he had a rather uncomfortable interview on the ABC.
One of the issues that's dogged you is that of your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Do you regret the relationship that you maintained with him against Melinda's advice and wishes?
Oh, I've said that this is, you're going way back in time. But yeah,
new audience.
I will say for the, over 100th time, yeah, I shouldn't have had dinners with him.
Now, this was something I pointed out before. I want you to pay close attention to his nonverbal behavior. Look at the look on his face. I shouldn't have had dinners with him. He almost looks like, in a way, he's kind of like, yeah, there's more to that story, obviously, right? Look at the look on his face. He's hiding something, right? Notice how he said at the beginning of his statement, he said, well, this is going back many years ago. So what? What did you expect her to say? You had a relationship with him yesterday? This interview took place a couple of months ago. Jeffrey Epstein was already dead. So for you to come in and say, well, yeah, you're going back way many years ago. So what? Jeffrey Epstein, these crimes that he had been committing against young girls goes back years ago, Bill. So it doesn't matter. Now watch this. He's going to go on.
Epstein had a way of sexually compromising people. Is that what Melinda was warning you about?
No. I mean, no, I had dinner with him and that's all.
I never understood the little bit of laughter there. It almost looked like he just looks very uncomfortable. Look, watch. See, this is something that I pay close attention to, the nonverbal behavior.
Dinner with him and that's all.
Yeah, he's uncomfortable.
And that you regret the relationship, the acquaintance?
That I had dinner with him.
And
okay, this part right here, she asked him, do you regret the relationship and the acquaintance? And he said that I had dinner with him. Even at that point, he was not willing to admit that there was a relationship between him and Jeffrey Epstein. He wanted to try to pass this off as though he just happened to have dinner with this guy, maybe once or twice, but there was no relationship outside of that. I call bull, and I called it back then. And now you're going to see why I was right. You're going to see why I was right. Let's go on.
The relationship between the foundation and Epstein, which
there never was any relationship of any kind.
Hold on to that. So she mentioned the foundation, the Bill Gates Foundation. Okay. He said there was never any relationship in any way of any kind. But then he's going to tell on himself, though. He's going to tell on himself. Let's go on.
That was a good start, Sophie, but I would have liked her to also ask why he began a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after he pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from a minor.
That part right there. He had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty. Pled guilty. We'll get into it. Let's go on.
And was also facing further accusations of sex trafficking children.
Rita, Sarah Ferguson really didn't press him on this issue. And his ex-wife came out, I think it was last year or the year before, and said that he had met with Jeffrey Epstein many times. So he said last night on 7:30 that it was just one dinner and dismissed it pretty quickly. But it seems like there was much more to it, because his ex-wife came out and said she was very concerned about their relationship, so much so that she wanted to meet him and went and met with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well,
and she also said, because we talked about this as well in that interview that Melinda Gates had with Gayle King, Melinda Gates also said that when she met Jeffrey Epstein, she said he made her feel very uncomfortable. I'll never forget that. She said she felt very uncomfortable and almost in a sense frightened. Why would you feel that way about someone that you just met for the first time? What kind of vibes were they giving you? She said that. And Bill Gates still continued to meet with him. Why would you continue to meet with a man that makes your wife feel that way? She went on to say in the interview she had nightmares about him. Not dreams, nightmares. She was afraid of him. What husband would continue to meet with this man knowing your wife said that's how he made her feel? Unless there was something that Jeffrey Epstein had on him. But they didn't have a relationship, remember?
Well, there's been some reporting on this because of what Melinda Gates has said. New York Times has got plenty on it. But you're right, when he kind of just dismissed it as a dinner or two, that really doesn't give you the full picture, does it, at all?
Okay, now that was one interview that he had. There was another interview that he had with, lo and behold, CNN's Anderson Cooper, where he was also asked about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Again, this is going back a couple of months ago. Let's all remember what Bill Gates said.
The New York Times and Wall Street Journal both reported in recent months that Melinda was concerned about a relationship you had with Jeffrey Epstein, who at the time you met him in 2011 had been already convicted of soliciting prostitution from a minor. The Times reported she hired divorce attorneys around the time in October 2019 when that contact with Epstein became public. Can you explain your relationship with Epstein? Did you have any concerns? Was there ever any concerns you had about it?
Okay, the key word I want you to, I'll take the captions off because it's up at the top, it's at the bottom. The key word I want you to pay attention to here is the word relationship. Now, Anderson Cooper just said the same thing, your relationship with him. Listen to this.
Oh, certainly. You know, I had several dinners with him, you know, hoping that what he said about getting billions of philanthropy for global health.
Pause. Let's go back. Listen to this again. The key word that I want you to pay attention to is relationship.
Can you explain your relationship with Epstein? Did you have any concerns? Was there ever any concerns you had about it?
Oh, certainly.
Oh, certainly. But in the other interview with the young woman, he said he didn't have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now his response is, oh, certainly. Can you explain your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Gates? Oh, certainly. I thought you didn't have a relationship with him. Let's go on. Boy, I tell you.
You know, I had several dinners with him, you know, hoping that what he said about getting billions of philanthropy for global health through contacts that he had might emerge. You know, when it looked like that wasn't a real thing, that relationship ended. But it was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility of, you know, being there. There were lots of others in that same situation, but I made it.
This has nothing to do with the others. You see what he's trying to do here? See, this piece right here. I told you he would tell on himself. This piece right here is very important. when he talks about not just agreeing that they had a relationship, but the kind of relationship.
You know, I had several dinners with him, hoping that what he said about getting billions of philanthropy for global health.
Philanthropy for global health. But in the previous interview, when she was asking him about the business, no. There were no relationship, no business, no. We just had dinner.
Through contacts that he had might emerge. When it looked like that wasn't a real thing, that relationship ended. But it was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility of, being there. There were lots of others in that same situation, but I made a mistake.
And in a way, he's kind of telling on other people that were involved as well. You see what he says? Like there were lots of others as well. Why'd you have to say that, Bill? This conversation is about your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
There's been reporting about workplace behavior in the past. The New York Times reported 6 women from Microsoft, the company you created, your foundation, and the financial firm that manages your fortune said that your behavior at times created an uncomfortable workplace environment. I know a spokeswoman for you acknowledged you had an affair 20 years ago with a Microsoft employee that she said ended amicably. Do you have regrets?
Well, certainly I think everyone does, but
so now we get to the point where Anderson Cooper brings up that there were women in the workplace of his company that had issues. They felt uncomfortable. And you have this relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. What is happening here? People see the connection here and people still applaud this man. People still applaud Bill Gates. Give Bill Gates a round of applause for all his philanthropy. The Gates Foundation. Meanwhile, Bill Gates is buying up farmland. So when the next pandemic hits, him and his people will be set. You will be without. They always applaud this man. You got women at Microsoft that didn't feel comfortable. The workplace behavior, the culture, and you hanging out with Epstein.
It's a time of reflection and at this point, I need to go forward.
This guy he's busted. I'm sorry. I would like to get a behavior analyst to watch these interviews. This guy is busted. It's just the time to go forward. He's only even saying this because he was caught. If he wasn't caught, if he wasn't outed as having some type of relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, that behavior at Microsoft might have continued.
My work is very important to me. Within the family, we'll heal as best we can and learn from what's happened.
Just on a personal level, I'm sorry for what you and your family are going through.
Yeah, he had to kiss up at the end in order to keep that gig. Now, that's all in the past. But this so-called relationship that Bill Gates said that he did not have or had or did not have with Jeffrey Epstein, I think it's really important that we bring in this article here from the Wall Street Journal, because this came out recently, and kudos to the Wall Street Journal for reporting this. Because this needs to be said. Jeffrey Epstein appeared to threaten Bill Gates over Microsoft co-founder's affair with a Russian bridge player. Now, I'm not here to, push at the man for having an affair on his wife. That's not what this is about. This is about the fact that Bill Gates lied in that interview, and he lied in the previous interview when he tried to downplay the relationship that he had with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein had blackmail information on you, and that's why you did what you did. It was not just a few dinners. That's how close you were to Jeffrey Epstein, to the point where he could blackmail you. He knew who you were having affairs with. Let's go on. Jeffrey Epstein discovered that Bill Gates had an affair with a Russian bridge player and later appeared to use his knowledge to threaten one of the world's richest men. The Microsoft co-founder met the woman around 2010 when she was in her 20s. Epstein met her in 2013 and later paid for her to attend software coding school. Highlight this. Why was Jeffrey Epstein paying for her school? You mean to tell me just some rich billionaire man is just going to say, hey, nice to meet you. I'll pay for your schooling? To hell no. She was doing something for him or for somebody in his circle. You just don't get free education like that. In 2017, Epstein emailed Gates and asked to be reimbursed for the cost of the course. See this? He emailed Bill Gates and asked to be reimbursed for the cost of the course. Let's go on. The email came after the convicted sex offender had struggled and failed to persuade Gates to participate in a multi-billion-dollar charitable fund that Epstein tried to establish with JP Morgan Chase. The implication behind the message, according to people who have viewed it, was that Epstein could reveal the affair if Gates didn't keep up an association between the two men. Remember when I told you that he was blackmailing people? Mr. Gates met with Epstein solely for philanthropic purposes. Having failed repeatedly to draw Mr. Gates beyond these matters, Epstein tried unsuccessfully to leverage a past relationship to threaten Mr. Gates. Now, that is who's given this statement? A spokeswoman for Bill Gates. Now, how does she know that he only met with him for philanthropic purposes? She doesn't know. She said what he told her to say, probably. He probably told her, this is the statement that you're going to give them. Let's go on. Epstein was accused of sexually abusing girls as young as 14 and pled guilty in 2008. Yada, yada. You guys know that story. Gates, 67 years old, a tech advisor to Microsoft and one of its largest shareholders, has said he met Epstein a few times only to discuss philanthropy, which he regrets and calls a mistake. Mila Anatova, the Russian bridge player, declined to comment on Gates and said she didn't know who Epstein was when they met. I had no idea that he was a criminal or had an ulterior motive. I just thought he was a successful businessman and wanted help. I am disgusted with Epstein and what he did. Let me get this straight, people. Gentleman just comes up to you, meets you, and just offers to pay for your schooling. Does this not send off alarms to you guys? Let's go on. The new details about Epstein and Gates reveal a layer of complexity to their relationship and shed new light on how Epstein operated. In the years between his 2008 conviction and death, Epstein packed his days meeting with politicians, businessmen, academics. We know we talked about the story about him and Noam Chomsky, and celebrities. He provided favors and sought to use the connections for his own purposes. And when the relationship soured, he could turn against people. But in order to turn against those people, you have to have information against them. You have to have information that would either ruin their reputation or their business or their image. Let's go on. Gates with a net worth Gates with a net worth in excess of $100 billion and one of the world's biggest philanthropists was among the most well-known names in Epstein's calendar. Starting in 2011, Gates had more than half a dozen meetings scheduled with Epstein. More than half a dozen meetings scheduled with Epstein. I went to dinner with them once or twice. including dinners at Epstein's New York townhouse. Documents show this. Gates flew on Epstein's private plane from New Jersey to Florida in March 2013, according to flight records. That same month, the two men met in France with an official on the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. They spent much of a day together in New York City in September 2014, meeting other billionaires, the journal reported. Bridge lessons. Gates had learned how to play bridge from his parents, and the card game became one of his favorite hobbies. Gates played with Anatova, another devotee of the game. She attended a university in Russia between 2000 and 2005, according to her LinkedIn profile. She later founded a bridge club in the US before taking on several roles as a software engineer in the Bay Area, her LinkedIn profile shows. In a video posted online in 2010, Anatova talked about meeting Gates at a bridge tournament and playing against the Microsoft co-founder. I didn't beat him, but I tried to kick him with my leg, she said in the video. So here's the picture here. Here's her. And here's the picture of her with Bill Gates. That's right, Kaladen. This is just one girl who knows how many more there are. Exactly. And that's the point I was going to get to as well. This is just the one we know about. And I think it's somewhat convenient. Oh, they said she was in college. Okay, convenient to release her name because she wasn't a minor. But how do we know that this was the only girl? And how do we know that there weren't other girls that were younger? You can't fool me with this. You can't sit here and tell me that Bill Gates was this afraid that Jeffrey Epstein was going to say, I'm going to tell people that you're having an affair with this bridge player who's a college student. Okay. Why would this be of a surprise? A lot of rich men, billionaires flying across the world. They have private jets. You mean to tell me this would come as a shock or a surprise to Melinda or any other woman that's married to these men? That's like sitting there telling someone whose boyfriend or husband is a professional basketball player, football player, baseball player. Oh, yeah, I think he may have had an affair. Duh. So what? You mean to tell me these men aren't greedy with groupies? You mean to tell me these billionaire men don't fly on private jets and go to strip clubs and shit? I don't buy that one bit. Don't buy it. I've been in strip clubs. I wasn't a dancer, but I've been in strip clubs. I've been in cheap strip clubs and I've been in fancy strip clubs. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you this. There are a lot of men that come into those clubs that have money, like Bill Gates, and they don't sit in the crowd with everybody else. They get the private rooms. So I'm supposed to believe that he was this afraid. Oh my God, he might tell my wife that I had an affair. Give me a break. However, he would be really afraid if Epstein were to tell his wife that he had an affair with maybe a female that was not of age. I don't believe that this is the only one. I don't buy it. Let's go on. Anatova had an idea to start an online business to teach people how to play bridge, and she sought funds for it, according to documents. And then it goes on to say that Boris, a Gates confidant and top science advisor at the time, who also knew Epstein, introduced Anatova to Epstein to help her raise the funds. You see how this is all? No, they're just doing all this because they want to be nice. Give me a break. Give me a break. Come on. These grown ass men helping out this young girl just because they want to be nice. No, they want something in return. Nikolic said when he first met Epstein, it was in the capacity as Gates' scientific advisor, and they discussed philanthropic proposals. I deeply regret that I ever met Epstein. His crimes were despicable. I never saw anything like his illegal behavior. My heart goes out to his victims and their families. You know, everybody says this. Everybody says they never saw anything. They never saw the behavior. They never saw it. Somebody saw it, damn it. Somebody saw it. Let's go on. Anatova and Nikolic met at Epstein's townhouse in November 2013, where she presented her proposal to Epstein, who provided feedback. Documents show she was looking to raise $500,000 for the venture, which she called Bridge Planet. Its mission was to promote Bridge by creating quality tutorials for beginners and advanced players. She wrote an email to Epstein for the meeting and reviewing the proposal. Epstein ultimately didn't invest in the project. The next year, Anatova briefly stayed in an apartment in New York City provided by Epstein. This guy was just providing apartments. I didn't interact with him or with anyone else while there. So there's Bill Gates and there's Nikolic there. She failed to secure the funding. Anatova said she decided to become a software programmer and asked several people to lend her money for a programming boot camp. Epstein agreed to pay, and he paid directly to the school. Nothing was exchanged. I don't know why he did that. When I asked, he said something like he was wealthy and wanted to help people when he could. Come on, man. Come on. So it goes on here. They go into the JP Morgan connection, which we have talked about JP Morgan and Epstein's connection on here multiple times. So I want to come down to this part. It says Epstein proposed that JP Morgan set up the fund with a minimum of 100 million contribution per individual and pay him millions of dollars in fees. In addition to the fees, the disgraced financier saw the fund as a way to rehabilitate his reputation. It hinged on securing support from Gates, the documents show. So this is how he was able to come at Bill Gates. In essence, this fund will allow Bill to have access to higher quality people, investment, allocation, governance without upsetting either his marriage or the sensitivities of the current foundation employees. Epstein wrote on August 16th, 2011 to two top JP Morgan executives, Jess Staley and Mary Erdos. The next day, Epstein wrote, Bill is terribly frustrated. He would like to boost some of the things that are working without taking away from those that are not. So, and you can read, I'm not going to read the entire article because it is really long, but this piece, not relationship troubles, hold on. This part right here. In 2017, Epstein contacted Gates about the Russian bridge player years after the relationship had ended, according to people familiar with the matter. He sent an email to Gates asking to be reimbursed for the cost of Anatova's coding school. The sum was immaterial for the two men, and the tone of the message was that Epstein knew about the affair and could expose it. The spokeswoman for Gates said he didn't make a payment. Mr. Gates had no financial dealings with Epstein. Days before he died in 2019, Epstein changed his will and named Nikolic as a backup executor. Nikolic said Epstein didn't discuss the idea with him beforehand and that he subsequently declined to serve. He could have listed Bill because that would have been, couldn't have listed Bill because that would have been too obvious. So he chose me. I have come to believe it was likely a retaliatory move against Bill Gates. So, like I said before, Epstein was blackmailing people and Bill Gates lied. Now, I said that back then months ago. I said this guy's lying. He's hiding something. But now where does RFK Jr. come in with all this? Because now there's this came my way, and this is not a recent article, but it was sent to me. And so I had to look into this as well. There apparently was some type of a connection between Jeffrey Epstein and RFK Jr. Like, it's just, who did this guy not know? Now, it was Newsweek that had reported this. I want to go into this article a little bit. Then I want to share some information from Whitney Webb herself that I think you need to hear. let's get into this article first. Now, this was 2021. I never saw this, but it has resurfaced, right? Because RFK Jr. is running for president. Who flew on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express plane? Full list of people named. So we knew about Bill Clinton, yada, yada, yada. But the part that I want to show you, we knew about Prince Andrew. We talked about that. Were the other names. And this was the part that I was kind of like, say what now? Who flew on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express plane? Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, comedian actor, for those who are not aware. That one was a shocker too. Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, and this is the one that I think threw people for a loop, which was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., violinist Perlman, U.S. Senator John Glenn, former Senator Majority Leader George Mitchell. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr., so again, because he is running for president, this article is resurfacing again. And someone sent it to me and I was like, say what now? So I did a little bit of digging, because first we want to say, just because he flew on the plane doesn't mean he was involved in any of those activities that happened there. Doesn't mean he even knew about it. We don't know. So I did a little bit of digging, and to my surprise, RFK Jr. actually interviewed Whitney Webb, who wrote the book, of course, about Jeffrey Epstein and his connections, on his podcast about Bill Gates and Epstein. And so I said to myself, well, if he interviewed her about this, if he had any wrongdoing, Whitney Webb would have known, and she would have put it in the book, right? Listen to this just a little bit. This is from his podcast, Epstein and Bill Gates with Whitney Webb. Let's dive in. I'm going to take it back a little bit so you can hear. Okay.
Hi, everybody. If you don't know who Whitney Webb is, or if you don't read her stuff, then you're missing probably the best investigative reporter in America today. And I really want to talk to you about the passports and also about Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein. I know you're doing a book about that right now, about their odd, strange bedfellows. But I will say this, that I don't know how you do it, Whitney, how you do your research, but you are more dialed in than anybody that I know and understand kind of the gravity of what's happening and all.
By the way, this interview took place May 22nd, 2021.
The characters are, and the role not only of the pharmaceutical industry, but the banks, the financial industry, the intelligence agencies, and others in, I guess, what people would now call the Great Reset, imposition, this use, this leveraging that we're seeing of the pandemic to impose these totalitarian controls and these huge cultural and value shifts and structural shifts in American democracy. Whitney writes for her own website, which is called Unlimited Hangout, and she also writes often for The Defender. Thank you for doing that, and also for The Last American Vagabond. But her stories are the kind of stories that I just wait, to come out, and I'm very excited when I see anything new that you've written. Let's talk about Bill Gates and his friend, Jeffrey Epstein. And wait, was that really a friendship? What was going on there?
Well, it's hard to just describe exactly the nature of the relationship in that sense, because a lot of the way the people around Epstein were, it's hard to really call them friends, because a lot of the way that network operates is through blackmail, even on people that are technically on their side. So it's a very dog-eat-dog world, I guess you could say. So friends may sort of be a loose term in the way that, regular people understand it. When you're talking about this type of, ruling elite, they have a very different mentality and a very different approach to friendship maybe than the average person would. But what's particularly notable about the Bill Gates Jeffrey Epstein relationship is that even now that it's being talked about in mainstream circles in connection with the Gates's divorce, the mainstream media continues to assert that they did not meet until 2011. There is a mountain of evidence, in my opinion, that suggests that this is categorically false and that they actually knew each other back in the 1990s. I first stumbled upon this in
That's an important piece I think people need to hear, that Whitney said that Bill Gates and Epstein actually knew each other back in the 1990s. I wanted you to hear that piece. Again, this is on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s podcast called RFK Jr. Podcast, the Defender Podcast, Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Gates with Whitney Webb. This was May 22nd of 2021.
2019, when I was doing an investigative series on the Epstein scandal. There was a scrubbed article from January 22nd, 2001 that had originally been published in the Evening Standard, a well-respected UK newspaper, talking about Prince Andrew and his relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And the part on Jeffrey Epstein and the reason it was scrubbed, it appears to have been scrubbed during the period of his first arrest between 2006 and 2007, is because it mentions the fact that Jeffrey Epstein at some point before the publication of that article had openly claimed to have been working in collaboration with the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. So, of course, the revelations that later came to light about Epstein, obviously the powers that be, the national security state, didn't want to have any obvious ties hanging around there. So that article ended up disappearing. But what was also notable about that article and what stuck out to me is that, since this was published in 2001, there's a line in there talking about Epstein, saying that Epstein was a billionaire hedge fund manager, which was sort of or property developer, which was sort of the theme at the time in articles about Epstein. But it says that Epstein made his millions through his business links with three individuals: Leslie Wexner, Donald Trump, and Bill Gates, being
I'm not going to play the entire conversation. It's a longer conversation. Eric, you can put the link to that podcast in the chat if you want, so people can follow that. But the reason why I wanted you to hear that is, number one, she debunks the lie that Bill Gates had about, oh, I met him in such and such. No, according to Whitney, Whitney's done a lot of research about this. They knew each other going all the way back to the 1990s. So like I told you that Bill Gates was lying when I covered that months ago, I was right. Bill Gates was lying. Two, this brought up a different question. If RFK Jr. was complicit in some way, shape, or form, why would he have this podcast and have Whitney Webb come on? And she's been on his podcast more than once, by the way, to talk about this particular discussion if he was guilty. That's something I want you to ask yourself, that question. And then I want to go into this statement here. Now, this is from the book in reference to RFK Jr. I'm going to try to put this up here as best as I can. Okay, yeah, you guys can still read it. In an interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for this book, he stated that Ghislaine Maxwell's entry into his family's social network in the early 1990s was likely through his former wife, Mary Richardson. Per Kennedy, Richardson seemed to have known Maxwell through Richardson's former boyfriend, Carlos Marilone. There is considerable supporting evidence for this claim. RFK Jr. also stated that the two occasions he was on Epstein's plane had been arranged between Ghislaine Maxwell and Mary Richardson. So I'll come back into this and just say, so that explains how he ended up on the plane. Let's go on. The Lolita Express. Where are we here? Right here. In one instance, the flight was part of a pre-planned fossil hunting trip to South Dakota, which he believed had been Ghislaine's idea, as Epstein had appeared to only have attended grudgingly. On that trip, Kennedy remembered that Epstein did not mingle with us and hardly spoke and did not participate in the fossil hunt. The other flight came about after Richardson accepted an offer from Ghislaine to fly Richardson and her family from New York to Palm Beach in order to visit Ethel Kennedy. his mother. Kennedy said he and Mary were accompanied by Kennedy's 2 older children on that flight. So the second flight, they're saying here that his children were with him. So it wasn't just him and his wife, his previous wife, by the way. I want to be clear here. I don't want people to think this is Cheryl. That's with his previous wife. Okay. Let's go back in here. On one of the flights, the return trip to New York from South Dakota, Epstein clearly had a problem with Kennedy's rambunctious children, and halfway back to New York, he, Epstein, ordered the pilot to put down at Midway Field in Chicago. He got off the plane and made his own way home. A blonde was waiting for him at Plainside in Chicago. That's Epstein. Kennedy remembered that Ghislaine was in silent tears after Epstein's abrupt departure. So for the questions that people had in reference to the list that was in the Newsweek article about RFK Jr.'s participation on those flights, this is what is said about his participation on the flights. And it sounds like the coordination happened between his former wife and Ghislaine Maxwell, not so much himself and Jeffrey Epstein. And it sounds like from this statement here, there actually wasn't that much activity or communication between Epstein and the rest of the family. So just wanted to explain that, because I know people have reached out to me and they said, did you see that what happened with RFK Jr. and Epstein? And look, we got to talk about it. No favorite here. No favorites. We have to talk about it. But this is the information that I have found so far. If someone sends me something else, I can talk about that as well. But what I've found so far is this information. So again, we don't know if he knew about what was going on there. Apparently, based on what I found, it seems like he does not. Why would he have Whitney Webb on the podcast to talk about Epstein? And I'm pretty sure Whitney Webb in her research would have found more information than what was just mentioned about those 2 flights on that plane. Whitney Webb has no problem revealing who has been involved. So that's where we are with that. Just wanted to make sure I did cover that, because that did come my way. But as I said, you guys, as time goes on, more and more names are going to be revealed. It's only a matter of time. Do I think we'll get everyone's name? No, I don't. But I really do think Whitney Webb is the go-to on this particular topic, because she has done extensive research. Just letting you know. But did want to make sure I addressed that. Case in point, though, Bill Gates lied. Case in point. Go ahead and hit that like button, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so. That helps me with the algo. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go to some of the comments and then we'll get to the next story here. Thank you for the super chat, Mary. Ha! He is working hard to carefully choose his words. Such a creep. Mika says Epstein was connected with some of the most notorious people in the world. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. I wasn't a dancer. Stop making me think of jokes. I wasn't a dancer. I've been to strip clubs before. And let me explain. The reason why we would go to strip clubs is because, after the regular club would close, especially this was in college and that was my early 20s. The regular club would, last call was 1 a.m. and I was young. You still want to go out and stuff. Well, the strip clubs were still open. So we go to the strip club. Yeah, Roger. Thanks for the super chat, Justin. Who will win if the nominees are Trump and Biden again? Answer: the ruling class. The rest of us lose. That's a good point, Justin. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Chris got pulled in by his friend Bill Clinton. CR says, I heard RFK Jr. got kicked off Epstein's plane for some reason. Kim says, I find it very odd that Whitney left RFK Jr. out. Well, now you know more info about that.